A proposal in the Wisconsin legislature could require warning labels on certain explicit content, which is raising concerns from some literacy advocates and booksellers. WMTV Shayna Najawan joins us now live in studio with more on that assembly bill. Shayna?
Cameron, supporters say the proposal is about protecting children online, but literacy advocates say they're worried about what it could mean for access to books.
Assembly Bill 961, relating warning labels for explicit content.
Assembly Bill 961 passed the Wisconsin Assembly last month.
There are 61 ayes and 34 noes. Assembly Bill 961's passed.
The proposal would require warning labels on certain explicit content sold commercially.
Protecting children in a digital world that was not built with their safety in mind.
Supporters say the goal is transparency and protecting children from harmful material.
We have heard stories of kids becoming desensitized, confused about relationships, even developing compulsive viewing habits before they're old enough to understand what they are seeing.
Under the bill, distributors would need to display a warning label when material meets Wisconsin's legal standard for explicit content.
I don't think anybody would like a book ban or any barriers to any of the book businesses.
But literacy advocates say policies like this raise questions about how books are evaluated.
We always are concerned when people are policing books or policing words. So we're always concerned about that, and always look at who is trying to police books, whether they are for adults or teenagers, kids.
Rowan Childs with the Madison Reading Project says her organization focuses on expanding access to books for kids and families across Dane County. She says a big part of that work is making sure children can see themselves in the stories they read.
The diversification of the books, even just that alone, is really important so that you can see yourself in the cover or you are the main character in the book. Those are all really important things so that everybody can engage in the books.
This bill does not ban lawful adult content. It does not criminalize speech. What it does is require basic, unavoidable transparency.
The bill would, of course, still need approval from the Wisconsin Senate and the governor before becoming law, but it has not seen any recent movement as lawmakers near the end of the current legislative session. Live in studio, Shayna Najawan, WMTV 15 News.
Shayna, thank you. National bookseller groups have also raised concerns, saying the proposal could create new requirements for bookstores and distributors.